current blood sugar is 117 and stable. Took a small correction for a blood sugar that just randomly headed up to 140, not figuring out why I did that. Who knows? Could have been the heavier protein breakfast getting to me later on. But I've had a pretty good couple of diabetes days, not going to complain, so I'm just waiting for hell to break loose. It's kind of one of those things, it's like you're on a good streak, and then all of a sudden you'll go through like a week where it's like, not today, diabetes, not today, I don't want to deal with you today, you're just messing up blood sugars, you're making me feel like crap. But anyways, with that being said, let's jump right into today's video. Hey everyone, it's Maddie. Welcome back to my channel. And I promised I'd make a video comparing multiple daily injections to an insulin pump. Now there's a lot of videos out there and I'm probably going to be repeating a lot of different things. But I figured I would compare it. Obviously because my experience is going to be way different than everybody else's experience with multiple daily injections. And some people absolutely hate multiple daily injections, where actually I didn't mind multiple daily injections, but I was just ready for the next step in advancing my management and the treatment of type 1 diabetes. So, these can kind of be pros or cons if you want to think about it, but I'm just going to go head to head and I'll kind of say which one I think is a better treatment choice for me. And me personally, if I was to tell any type 1 diabetic what is a better treatment, I will give you my opinion on that. So, first of all, if you're on multiple daily injections, you're going to be either using one of two options. You're either going to be using a syringe and a vial, or you're going to be using some form of an insulin pen. Now, I've already did a video comparing and contrasting syringe and vial versus insulin pen, so if you want to go check that out, feel free to go do so. You should just be able to type in the Google search bar or the YouTube search bar, syringe and vial versus insulin pen, and then put my name after it, Maddie Nielsen, and it should pop right up for you. So, I'm going to start with like multiple daily injection, and then I'll kind of do the contrasting point on a pump. So, the first thing on multiple daily injections that I could think of is you can inject and forget, meaning you want to take a dose, or you want to figure out your calculations, and you need 4 units, you put your needle on, you can put it on your arm, inject and forget. You don't have to sit and worry about like, oh, is it attached to me, or is it going to fall off, stuff like that. Whereas like with an insulin pump, you're always going to have something attached to you. If you have the Omnipod like me, you're going to have the pod attached to you. If you have a tandem pump or a Medtronic pump or a different pump, you're probably going to have some sort of infusion set attached to tubing, which is then connected to your reservoir or your cartridge, which is then connected to your insulin pump that you would wear and clip on your pocket or clip on your pants or your shirt or whatever the case may be. So you're always going to have something attached to you with an insulin pump. And this is one of the things I miss the most about multiple daily injections, was just inject and forget. And I feel like, because when you're on shots, I feel like if you have it in your head that I can't eat it unless I give myself an injection, I feel like there's a couple times where I've eaten things and forgotten to bolus for them and have had high blood sugar because of it. Whereas with when I was on injections, like I was always like, gotta take a shot first, you know, and then you can eat. So and stuff like that. And I'm gonna be doing a video, hopefully comparing and contrasting finger sticks and CGMs, and I'm also gonna bust some insulin pump myths. Like one of the myths being that you're gonna gain weight once you enter onto an insulin pump. No, you will not gain weight. You will gain weight if you eat more than what you burn. And some people, when they switch to an insulin pump, are more tempted to eat more because it's more convenient to eat more, because all you have to do is push a button and you're going to get food, or you're going to get insulin delivered, and then you can eat whatever food you want. So I'll delve into that later, but the one main thing I miss with multiple daily injections is inject and forget. Then the obvious, multiple daily injections cost less than a typical insulin pump. And all you need for insulin injections is just some form of insulin and a way to deliver the insulin. If you have a pen, you have either a cartridge or a plastic pen and a pen needle. Whereas with an insulin pump, you're probably going to have multiple things. Like with the Omnipod, it's much more simple, but for other pumps, you need the tubing, you need the reservoir, you're going to need a new inset. With the Omnipod, you need a new pod every time. You need to make sure you have your PDM or the brains of your pump every time to change your pump. So there's definitely a lot more stuff needed, therefore the cost is going to be more. The third thing I can think of is injections can be less convenient depending on where you are and what situation you're in, whereas pumps are more convenient. It's so convenient to push a button and have insulin delivered to you versus having to pull out your pen, take it off, once you figure out what you're going to take for a dose, dial it up, and put your pen needle on, dial it up, put it in your body, and inject. And I'm obviously not injecting in proper spots, so please don't inject here. If you're going to inject in your arm, please do so in this area. But it's the idea that it's not as convenient to be carrying around pens or a syringe and vial. They're more putsy. It takes more time to get them ready, and I'll talk more about it later, but it's less discreet as far as that's concerned. The fourth thing that comes to mind with MDI versus a pump is insulin pen or syringe and vial method is not likely to fail giving you insulin unless you draw too much air in or for whatever reason you have a clogged or bent needle. Whereas with an insulin pump, no matter what, if something fails with the insulin pump, your insulin delivery is going to be stopped. So, there's that chance for that pod to fail, or the mechanics to fail on the pump, or the pump in general to just blow up or fail. You guys know, if you've joined my channel recently or have watched my Omnipod videos, I'm actually on my second PDM because the original PDM they sent me was not properly communicating with the pods, and that may have had something to do with why I was kind of running higher blood sugars for a while. Because if the pump cannot communicate with your site or with your pods, if you're an Omnipod, or you don't know if you're getting the appropriate amount of insulin delivered in your basal rate or when you're eating. The next thing I can think of is when you're on multiple daily injections, which is the one thing I did not like, was having to take long-acting insulin. Now, this is replacing your basal insulin, and this insulin, as long-acting, is designed to keep your blood sugar steady and stable for a period of 24 hours, ensuring that there's always insulin in your body and to control your liver's spillage of glucose. Whereas with an insulin pump, it's an automatic basal delivery. Every 5 minutes, I get a microscopic dose of insulin, which is one kind of insulin. You only use rapid or regular insulin in a pump, and it's delivered to you via basal, and it also is delivered as a big bolus like it normally would be prior on MDI when you're ready to eat or when you want to give a correction. And another thing about multiple daily injections, I'm going right down on the list, is once you inject, you're stuck. This is probably one of the worst things about multiple daily injections. You give yourself a big dose, you are stuck with that dose. You better deal with it or be ready to face consequences. The worst consequence I had was going to a Chinese restaurant. I bolused 7 units. I should have bolused those 7 units and split it in half when I was on injections, or I should have taken only so much now and a little bit later, and I probably would have not had a blood sugar in the 30s. Whereas with an insulin pump, you're going to have the convenience of temporary basal, suspending your insulin, doing an extended bolus where you're going to put up more of a safety net and mirror more what your body wants in the moment. And if you understand the role of like fats and proteins in your meal, those digest slower. So therefore, you're not going to need as much insulin up front to cover anything. You're going to need more later. And the way I did this on injections, and I'll talk about this later, to do an extended bolus on injections, like with pizza, I would try taking like 3 or 4 units up front and then deliver another 2 units a couple hours later, give myself a second shot, and I was able to maintain normal blood sugars with that. And the idea that you have to do tons of injections daily is kind of annoying and repetitive, and it's almost like a reminder that, like, yes, you have to continuously do this, whereas like with a pump, you don't have to inject every day. It's usually you give yourself a needle to put the cannula in that goes in once every 3 days, and you're good to go. As far as scar tissue is concerned, I feel like it depends on who you ask, but I definitely notice I have less scar tissue with having an insulin pump because you're not continuously injecting yourself every day. Now, I do get these bigger lumps than I used to get with multiple daily injections. However, they heal quickly, and as long as, like with anything else, if you rotate your injection sites or your pump sites, as long as you rotate them around your body, and you're not using the same spots over and over and over again, or like using your arm 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in a row, then you're not going to get lipohypertrophy or scar tissue buildup and buildup of insulin resistance. Because if you get a bunch of scar tissue that sits in one area, you go to inject there a different time, You may have a problem absorbing the insulin. You may be insulin resistant. It may lead to high blood sugars. The insulin won't absorb as good. Another thing about multiple daily injections that I liked was that there was a long-acting insulin safety net, meaning that, like, if all else failed, or I forgot something, or didn't quite dose enough for my meal, at least I knew I had long-acting insulin in my body that would kind of maybe help a little bit or not cause dangerously high blood sugars. Whereas with an insulin pump, you're more likely to have high blood sugars that could result in diabetic ketoacidosis if something goes wrong, because you do not have long-acting insulin in your body. You're getting the insulin in the moment that you need it. And if that insulin delivery is stopped for a long enough period of time, your blood sugars will just start randomly going up because there's no insulin to take care of the sugars. And when there's no insulin, that leads to high blood sugars, which then in turn can lead to diabetic ketoacidosis and can be fatal. So you have a higher likelihood of being in diabetic ketoacidosis on a pump. However, if, like me, you manage yourself well, you understand the risks and the roles and the directions for operating your insulin pump correctly, just like any machine or tool, it can fail, but understanding how to manage it and take care of it properly will definitely not lead you to have as many high blood sugars. If honestly, now that I got myself dialed in on my insulin pump, I have basically the same control that I had on multiple daily injections, and I think it's better because I can do temp basals, I can do extended boluses, I can suspend my insulin, and I've done that. And I'm going to talk about, this is a trick that the Juice Box podcast talks about, is switching basal for bolus. This actually happened to me yesterday where I knew I dosed myself too much up front, and I figured, okay, if I dose myself an extra unit up front, in the next, or I think I dosed myself like an extra half a unit more than what I needed, and I figured the units per hour that I have on my basal was close to a half a unit, so I actually shut my basal insulin off for a half an hour, and it steadied my blood sugar out. And my blood sugar never went high, it never went low. It was really neat to just flatline that because I exchanged basal for bolus. I understood that there was too much bolus, so I cut the basal out and let kind of that bolus do the job of the basal for a half an hour, and then I turned it back on. There's some neat things that I'm going to talk about, but I'm not going to go too crazy into depth with that, so I can continue on with this video. Now we're going to get into more being less discreet or more discreet. Multiple daily injections are not as discreet, and I did multiple daily injections for 10 months before I switched to an insulin pump, and I didn't really care about being discreet, but some people prefer to not show their diabetes, and I don't think that's an issue. But however, there are some people that are scared to give themselves an injection in a restaurant or in a public setting, and they may be scared that somebody is going to make fun of them or look at them or stare at them, and then they won't take their injection and end up with high blood sugar later. I was never scared of that. I was always prepared. If somebody would say this is disgusting, I'll say it's either life or death. What do you choose? Don't look at me. I'm kind of one of those blunt and bold people. You tell me something, I'm going to give it right back to you. Don't make me angry, because I will get angry back. But again, I'll talk about that. There's a fine line about doing stuff like that. And I think it's wrong. And there was actually something that came up recently, that there was a person that wanted to give themselves an injection at some sort of seafood restaurant in Miami or Florida. And somebody named Doreen she was a journalist, was all upset that, I don't mind them doing injections, but it's disgusting to look at, and they should think about doing an injection in a bathroom or in their car, or, not in a public place where people can see. And everybody and their auntie and the diabetic community is all upset about it, and I am too, because it's your life. And you know what? If it was them in your shoes, I don't think they want to be told to go to a bathroom and inject. That is one of the dirtiest places you can inject insulin. Who would want to do it in their car and conceal themselves? Now, it's one thing if you want to do it in your car and want to pre-bolus or whatever is fine, but you should be free and open to, give yourself an injection. You don't have to make a big show about it, but if you got to do one in your arm, just roll up your sleeve, you have everything ready. I mean, it's not that hard to give yourself an injection. It only takes like 30 seconds and it's done. But the convenience of having an insulin pump is, the only thing I get asked is if it's on my arm, and a lot of people ask, does that hurt, or what is that? I'll just tell them it's an insulin pump, but I've never been scolded for bolusing in a restaurant. So I definitely feel like having an insulin pump, it's more discreet and makes it look like you're, like you don't have a medical condition. Unless you have it in an area where people are going to look at it, but I could care less what people think. I'm going to manage my disease in any situation or any place that I am in, and I don't care what people think. You know, if they were in my shoes, they wouldn't want me making fun of them. So the benefit of multiple daily injections that I actually kind of liked was that you could rotate your sites every single time you wanted to bolus. Whereas with an insulin pump, once you pick a site, you're stuck with it for 3 days. But I feel like once you pick a site and stick with it for 3 days, it actually absorbs pretty good. And as long as there's no cannula kinks, nothing gets bent, nothing's broken, it's not a bad site, you're in a good area, you're not in muscle, I don't think there's nothing wrong. But because of, for me, like, not rotating like, having a site on for 3 days, I noticed, like, this one's getting towards its end. And I noticed when the insulin goes in, it either burns, or I'll get a welt at the end, and sometimes that's more annoying. But again, take it or leave it for what it's worth. Insulin pumps versus multiple daily injections, there's pros and cons. There's going to be benefits and not so fun benefits or negatives to either one. The main thing that I really liked about having an insulin pump, and I love about having an insulin pump, is the precise dosing. If I need 4.35 units, I can do that. Whereas with injections, prior to me having the HumaPen Luxura HD or the Humalog Junior pens, I had to either round up to 4 or 5 and risk going high or low. In these half-unit pens, you can get as close to a half a unit. But maybe my body really doesn't need 3.5 units. Maybe it needs 3.4. And I find that my body responds super well to the precise dosing. Like, my body is, like, super good with, like, if I need 3.45 units, it just delivers it. And it's so nice to get more exact matching for what your body really needs versus kind of having to round up or down. And multiple daily injections, there's definitely a thing where it's less complicated, in my opinion, because you really only need a couple things. You need the insulin pen or the insulin vial, and you need a syringe or a pen needle. Whereas with an insulin pump, it's more complicated in that you have to push buttons, make sure it's delivered, make sure it's communicating, make sure your site's good, make sure that the insulin you're putting in is good, make sure the cannula is properly inserted, make sure it's not in a painful spot or where it's going to get ripped off. I feel like there's more complicated components to an insulin pump. But once you learn how to maneuver it, just like anything else, once you learn how to give yourself an injection, I think you can learn how to use an insulin pump. Now, there is a thing where people can have decreased need for insulin on an insulin pump because it apparently absorbs better or your body responds better. Now, I notice mine is nearly the same. Slightly less in the basal aspect because I find out that I can fine-tune my basal to where I know I need less in the afternoon and more in the morning, whereas on multiple daily injections, I would often have a low blood sugar, or I would have to fix a low before it happened in the middle of the afternoon, and I might have random high blood sugars in the morning because of the long-acting insulin not exactly mirroring what your body needs in the moment. Depending on the person, you may have less insulin needs. Your need for insulin may be less. You have an insulin to carb ratio that is on the lower side, meaning that you take 1 unit per 15, whereas on injections you took 1 per 12. Not the case for me. The insulin to carb ratios have stayed the same. The basal insulin is pretty close too. Maybe just a touch less, but it is not like a crazy drastic change that my team originally thought I was going to have. And that depends on everybody. And you may have less need, you may need more when you're on an insulin pump, or you may, like me, stay about the same. I don't think there's really a lot of background on this, but to me, like, I feel like if you're using at least so much on injections, that you should use at least that much on a pump, and then you can tone it up or down depending on what your needs. But I feel like everything when you transition should be the same, but a lot of times they'll reduce your dose like they did for me, either to make me run high for safety, or they may reduce the dose thinking that you're going to be more insulin sensitive, and when in reality you're actually not going to be. So that's an opinion thing, and I think it's more of like depending on the individual itself. Now, the thing with multiple daily injections is you probably have to do these for so many months before you can get approved to have an insulin pump. When I was talking with the Omnipod representative, like, so that's one of the first things they asked me was, like, how long have you been doing multiple daily injections? And at the time, I was doing them for 9 months. And they're like, oh, then you're plenty fine. Like, insurance companies like to see at least 6 months on injections. I think it's kind of a weird rule, but at the same time, I understand why, because they want to see, like, if you're going to doctor's appointments and if you're following protocols and you're testing your blood sugar, or you're giving yourself injections at meals, and you're controlling yourself the old manual way first before you move on to something more complicated like an insulin pump. Although I think the joke is that they're trying to get you to control on something, to get better control on something that may be harder for you to control on, whereas you can get better control on an insulin pump. Let me tell you, I don't care what method of insulin you use, you can get great control. It's a matter of how you use it, though. The final thing I'm going to talk about is the risk of hypoglycemia, and I definitely notice on an insulin pump, like, I hardly have low blood sugars, and if I have low blood sugars, they're not that severe. The other day, Dexcom read my blood sugar as LOW the other day again, and I was actually 57. I had a weird low blood sugar overnight. But I feel like when I treat a low now, or like if I'm going to prevent a low, like they're not as bad, or there's definitely less of them, and when I treat them, they go up super fast, and I'm done. Like I feel like the recovery time for a low blood sugar, or the amount of lows that I'm having, is so minimal. Now keep in mind, I have minimal lows anyway, 1 to 2%. Over a 90-day period, but I feel like now that's really going to be reduced being on an insulin pump, because I can take proactive measurements to do an extended bolus where I'm not dumping all the insulin up front, or do a temp basal when I'm exercising, or do a temp basal with high-fat food, or when, if my body's running funny on my period, or during this weather, if I'm more insulin sensitive, like in winter for me, I'm actually more insulin sensitive. My body uses so much energy to stay warm that I need to reduce my insulin dose. Now I can really do that and be more proactive about it on an insulin pump. So I feel like on an insulin pump, your risk of hypoglycemia is way low. I understand that. And I think that's a great thing. Because ultimately, we don't want low blood sugar. We want to be maybe riding near low blood sugar, but we don't want to be at low blood sugar. Like for me, I'm comfortable letting my blood sugar, I'm comfortable going to bed with my blood sugar in the 70s. As long as I'm stable, and as long as I know my basal's set right, I could coast at 70 all night and wake up with a blood sugar in the upper 70s. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just don't want we don't want to be coasting in the 50s or something, because then that's dangerous. Connected for even a short period of time, you could have random blood sugar spikes. Sometimes I notice, like, depending on how I'm feeling or what's going on in the moment, if I change my insulin pump out, I may have to deliver a bolus of a random half a unit or 1 unit and just deliver it to, like, transition in between where, like, I didn't have any insulin for the time I changed my insulin pump. But I haven't noticed much of a problem recently, but I noticed that more, like, if my blood sugar's already trending up, or if I'm having, like, I'm on my period, or I'm dehydrated, I may just bolus a random unit or a half a unit to just kind of level things out so I don't go really high. So be careful if you're disconnected from your pump for a long period of time, because you don't have that long-acting safety net to protect you. But to me, as long as you're careful about it, and you, like, having a CGM makes it so much more convenient to know, like, hey, where's my blood sugar now and what direction it's headed. So now I'm going to get into the final thoughts of what do I think is better. I personally, for my lifestyle and for the way I manage my condition, I think the insulin pump is better, because I think it more mirrors to what your body needs. I feel like having only one kind of insulin dumped in your body continuously is easier on your body. I feel like it's more convenient. I feel more of a human being now than I did. Not saying I didn't feel degraded giving myself shots, but I feel like I have my life back for the first time in a year, as far as, like, not worrying about shot after shot after shot after shot. I don't hate multiple daily injections. And I'm not against people that have done them for the whole entire time of being a type 1 diabetic, or a diabetic in general. I'm not against it. But for my management, and for the career I'm going into, and for the way I manage my diabetes, an insulin pump is more convenient for me. I believe that. But I would never force it on somebody if they prefer injections. I'm happy for you. As long as you can obtain great control on injections, good for you. And let me tell you, I was able to maintain great control on injections, keeping A1Cs less than 6.5, for the most part, on injections, and it's fantastic. Now I feel like with an insulin pump, I can learn to maintain that and keep that well, with using a few more advanced features that can more mirror what my body needs in the moment. Like I said, I'm not against people that do insulin injections, not in the least, because I did them for 10 months, and many of you are watching started out that way. And if you're continuing to use them and they benefit you, great, I'm glad for you. If I had to go back on multiple daily injections, it wouldn't really bother me, because it just becomes so natural just to be poked and prodded and giving yourself insulin. You're just at the point where it's just like, whatever, you know, like, this is my life, this is the life I was given, I need to be thankful for what I do have and not gripe about what I don't have. So I don't really like it when people say, like, MDI is the only way to go, or an insulin pump is the only way to go. No, it depends on the person, it depends on what they want to do, it depends on what kind of management they want to get, it depends upon what they think is best for them and how their body responds to different insulin therapy and insulin treatments. There's nothing wrong with either one. So I hope you enjoyed this video, kind of a longer one, but I hope you got an idea of what an MDI is versus an insulin pump. I went into on a lot of different things. If I forgot anything, feel free to comment down below or give your suggestions to anybody else, because I like listening to your guys' suggestions, and I think a lot of people can really learn from, we could all learn from each other, and I enjoy reading and reacting in the comments and sparking conversation, because you don't know if somebody has found something that works better for them or has discovered something that works better for them as far as like insulin pump versus MDI. Comment down below, share your experiences with them. I'd love to hear them. And yeah, so if you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. Feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. I post videos every single week about diabetes plus more. And until next week, 4 more videos. Take care, God bless, be kind, spread positivity, and be thankful. Bye everyone.